The vivo X60 Pro Plus is finally here, and I've been extremely excited for it due to it housing a very bright 50 megapixel ISOCELL GN1 sensor, gimbal stabilized Sony IMX598 ultra-wide sensor, periscope, and telephoto camera wrapped in Zeiss coating and slapped into a nano crystalline camera module on top of a gorgeous high-grade leather backing. And let's not forget about the Snapdragon 888 chipset under the hood and innovative OriginOS software skinned over Android 11. We get earphones in the box over here, which is definitely not what flagship companies are going for, let alone the charger. We get an actual dongle for your earphones as well as a hard shell case, and we get a charger bundled in the box with a Type-C to Type-A cable, and that charger is indeed flash charge 55 watt charging. I'm super excited to get into this phone, so let's go ahead and unwrap it. This is the Phantom Blue variant of the phone. It also comes in classic orange. Not quite sure where they got that phrase Phantom from. Leave that one up in the air for you guys. It looks absolutely fantastic with this eco leather back. It really does strike me as a gorgeous phone. 4200 mAh battery, 55 watt charging. Unfortunately, no wireless charging, no IP certification, but we do have 5G and NFC. Like I said, that backing is of course high grade leather. We also have an aluminum frame and Gorilla Glass 6 at the front. And fingerprint smudges are not apparent whatsoever due to it being a leather back. But if you are a little bit skeptical about getting a scuff in that, you do have that included hard case in the box, and it doesn't look that bad. I guess you could say I'd rather prefer to use it without it. We have a textured power button, non-split volume rocker. It says professional photography at the top of the phone. We do have dual SIM over here, but unfortunately no space for a micro SDXC slot. We do have USB 2.0 transfer speeds, that is USB Type-C. We have a single downward firing speaker. It does not utilize the top earpiece, which kind of sucks. That camera module isn't that small compared to other phones around. It might be a tad smaller, though it's still quite hefty, meaning that when it's on a flat surface, it's definitely going to have quite a bit of camera wobble, pretty much the same as all other phones with a decent camera setup on the back though. The design looks spectacular. Honestly, it's a little subtle, but it's very classy. That leather finish, the touch to the fingertip is just outstanding compared to all these glass backs. I really like it. There's so many glass phones out there. Having something different is certainly unique. But what about the front, since that back is so darn gorgeous? 20:9 aspect ratio, 6.56 inch dot display. It is Full HD plus, it is AMOLED, and we do have HDR10 plus capabilities, 1300 nits of peak brightness, 120 Hz refresh rate, and 240 Hz touch sampling rate. It looks really good, nice close up and personal. Any angle that you view it in pretty much. And the color accuracy is on par with all other flagships around, even its little brother, the iQOO7. Curvature compared to other curved phones around, the Vivo being at the top over there. It's not the deepest such as the Huawei, but it's not as subtle as the Xiaomi and as the Samsung are, but it looks pretty good. And like I said, color reproduction on this panel is pretty accurate compared to the rest of the phones here. It does really pop, not so much stand out amongst these other phones, but it's in par with all the top line flagship phones, aside from the iQOO7, which is a little bit cheaper all the way on the left hand side. We have minimal bezels over here, though not the tiniest bezels. At least we don't have those little chuffed ears at the corner of each corner over there like you see on the Xiaomi. Unfortunately, no QHD resolution here. We're stuck to Full HD plus as we've seen on the iQOO7. We do have 120 Hz refresh rate though, and we have Smart Switch and 60 Hz. Some go for either 60 and 120 or 60 and Smart Switch, 60 and adaptive. This has all three, which is a big plus. And of course, if you compare 120 Hz across the board here, the quality of all of them looks pretty good. I mean, you can't really see it. You actually have to feel it in real life to know what I'm talking about. It's a little bit quicker than the Huawei on the right hand side, but 90 Hz I still feel is the sweet spot. It's always good to have the overpowered 120 though, if games do support it. We'll get to that a little bit later on. We have a couple other options when it comes to the display. We can change color, Ultra HD to make things look more vibrant when you're in the gallery, and you can switch if you want to hide the camera in certain apps. We do have dark mode, and you can change your wallpaper to be more dim when you are in dark mode, and you can make it lighter and darker, which is neat, but it doesn't work in all third-party apps. It does work in some. Of course, it works in first-party apps, and it does a pretty great job. We have an always on display as well. It's not as customizable as you would see in ColorOS 11, though we do have a sensory clock which changes over time, which is pretty cool. We have a couple customization options, but the original OriginOS one still is my favorite. We do have a fingerprint sensor. It is optical, not ultrasonic over here. We can change the fingerprint icon animation as well as the recognition animation to a bunch of different choices here. It looks pretty great. I like the one with no animation. I think it looks absolutely fantastic since you don't have to worry about seeing anything. And comparing the speed to its brother, the iQOO 7, it's a tad quicker than that. A lot quicker than the Xiaomi, but that is obviously heavily skinned with MIUI 12's animations. The Samsung is a tad quicker in many circumstances due to its second generation ultrasonic sensor, but we do have a vivo here, which was the first to bring under display fingerprint sensors across the board. We also have facial recognition, which is nice and snappy. We can add animations, though it's not around the camera, so it looks a bit strange compared to its little brother, the iQOO 7, well, its bigger brother, I guess, recently released. A tad quicker than the Xiaomi. Pretty much on par, actually a bit quicker than the Samsung. Of course, they're not known for fast facial recognition, but you got to remember that it's not as secure as the Huawei because the Huawei has a 3D system. And we do have a 32 megapixel f2.5 selfie snapper. This is the same camera that we've seen in very recent Vivo flagships of the X series. Looks pretty great, though there is some edge detection.
This is Technic recording a 1080p, 1080p and 30 frames per second, 30 FPS. On the new flagship phone from Vivo, the X60 Pro Plus. Pro and Plus yet were capped at 1080p and 30 FPS when recording using the selfie video. So it turns out that noise reduction was actually enabled. Never seen that before on a smartphone selfie video recorder. I just disabled it now. Let me know what you guys think of the difference in the audio quality from when the background noise is reduced compared to just what you would regularly see on any other smartphone like this.
When it comes to night mode, it looks okay. It's pretty dark here. When you use night mode and you put it on, beauty is off, but it makes my face look like a bit of a brushed doll. Flash on looks a hell of a lot better if you ask me. Now the main cameras, the main reason that you're here right now, we have a 50 megapixel ISOCELL Gen1 sensor. We have optical image stabilization and laser autofocus for this guy. For the first time in a smartphone, an ultra wide sensor is getting a gimbal here, and it has a 114 degrees field of view, and the gimbal can adjust that by give or take 3 degrees of movement. We also have a periscope and a telephoto, and of course we have a Zeiss T coating around both sides of each lens at the back of the phone. The ultra wide looks fantastic as you would expect from the IMX 598. You actually get a 100 megapixel main mode, which is actually upscaled. 50 megapixel main over here, 12.5 4:1 pixel binning looks fantastic due to AI. We have 2 times zoom, which is optical using the 32 megapixel sensor, 8 megapixel periscope, 5 times optical, 10 times digital, still looks pretty good. 30 times digital doesn't look good. 60 times, just, it's a no-go, guys. The Samsung S21 Ultra can definitely do a better job. When it comes to portrait, I did stand back to get the 2 times. It doesn't look that great due to edge detection. We need a LiDAR here, I guess. And the macro mode is actually surprisingly good. Now, talking about the main sensors compared to the S21 Ultra on the right, the X60 Pro on the left actually takes better pictures in my opinion. It's a lot brighter. You can sense that the aperture is wider here in all scenes across the board, though I do think there's more dynamic range within the S21 Ultra. We do have 8K video at 30 FPS. When it's at 30 FPS, it usually means it's upscaled from 6K instead of raw 8K footage to 24 frames per second. We do have 4K at 60 FPS, which is good with OIS. It's nice and stable when I'm walking super slow. Yeah, you'll see when we get to the gimbal action later. 1080p, 60 FPS looks just as good. Not as much detail as 4K, but it's nice and smooth nonetheless. Here is the ultra wide mode with the gimbal enabled, 4K, 60 FPS and gimbal. I mean, it's doing a great job. You'll see what I mean in a second. It doesn't show the gimbal camera, the ultra wide camera really moving there, but when we switch to the ultra wide mode, then it kicks in. And when you see this, oh my goodness, the smile on anyone's face when they see this camera move within their smartphone module is absolutely phenomenal. Gimbal off on the left, gimbal on the right. You can see a huge difference over there. Gimbal off all the way on the left, on the middle, and on and ultra stable on the right. I think the middle one with just the gimbal on is the perfect balance between quality and stabilization. Now the S21 Ultra on the right hand side doesn't have a gimbal. I'm going to leave this one open-ended. Let me know what you guys think in terms of stability. Compared to the S21 Ultra on the right hand side, just regular 4K 60 FPS footage here, you can definitely see a bit of shakiness coming from the main sensor on the X60 Pro Plus. Now, moving on to night mode. This is night mode off, but guys, this was really dark. All I could really see here were those lights. Turning night mode on doesn't make much of a difference since the sensor is so wide, it collects all the light data already. We do have night mode for the first time for vivo video recording. It does a great job, but you lose a lot of detail. You do get a lot of light and you gain a lot of color, but yeah, it's much of a muchness. I think it's still a gimmick. We still have quite a bit to do. We do have OriginOS 1.0. It is amazing, guys. Skinned over Android 11 here. There is so much to talk about. In my vivo IQ7 review that I posted recently, I did cover most of this stuff. I'm going to go through it very similarly over here. I do have some timestamps in the description if you'd want to skip over this, though we can travel into a parallel world, which is regular Android, and go back to this iOS mixed Android looking one. We can split and remove split combined icons. We can adjust the sizes of pretty much any icon out there. It's really awesome. We have these things called core components. Of course, it's only released in China for now, but I'm sure we'll see more core components in relation to westernized societies going forward. We can customize colors of the notification pad. We can change the background to go to a monochromed theme, a blurred theme, a sky where it shows the weather at the top, as well as a time theme which shows you shadows which reflect the actual time of the day. We have a dynamic wallpaper, only one. We have static, and we have this thing over here, which is actually really cool. This wallpaper works in a sense that how long you walk in a day. So if you have 4,000, 6,000, 8,000, 10,000 steps, it slightly opens. That's why mine wasn't very open. I'm a YouTuber. I'm sitting most of the time. We have some gestures which you can flick between, cards which you can pull in from the right-hand side. You have shortcuts to jump in with the camera. We have split screen over here, and adding in split screen, you can then add this combination to your home screen to open up in a ready prepared split screen for later. There it is. Tap on that. It reopens both apps together the way that you left them off. That is absolutely fantastic. And we have this multitasking view like you would see on Windows. Xiaomi's trying to get this right. I think Vivo have nailed it. We have a bunch of different animation styles which you can flick between, from fingerprint sensors, of course, like I showed you earlier, to crazy things like plugging in your charger, and you can translate everything on the screen and save it as a picture for later, which is a big plus for people studying or working abroad. The haptics feel as they should for a flagship of this sort. But what about the speakers? Let's test out the single super audio speaker from Vivo compared to the dual stereo speakers using Dolby Atmos from Samsung. Now let's go ahead and use that super audio tech, and let's give some gaming a listen.
Is he talking to a dragon? Who's there?
What do we have here?
Talking about gaming, we do have 3 gigs of extra RAM on top of 12, so it says, but it's actually using the ROM and not the RAM. I usually use Geekbench Pro to test out FPS, but unfortunately it hasn't been working on Snapdragon 888 powered devices. So I usually shoot over to developer options, like the Samsung actually showed an FPS count over there. That's lacking on the Vivo, but we can show the FPS at the top left, though it's just showing what that screen can do, not actual real-time counting. So that's what we're going to use for now. Hopefully that changes going forward. Genshin Impact, most of you guys have been asking for this. Let's focus on the in-game overlay that you get from Ultra Game Mode within the Vivo. The best thing about it is this eagle eye view, which pops the brightness higher than its max, as well. It gives this incredible color and lighting. Everything just comes to life. We're going to jump up all the settings in terms of graphics and FPS for Genshin Impact. It says 120, though the game is capped at 60. This is not a real world FPS counter, so I guess that is probably why it's saying 120. Hopefully in the future I can do a gaming review on this phone and we'll be able to use a more real-time FPS counter for that. But it looks like it's hitting 60 FPS with a Snapdragon 888. You would kind of expect it with Full HD. We also have PUBG Mobile here. Of course, we do have 90 FPS mode on other devices. It still hasn't come to Snapdragon 888 powered smartphones yet, so we're only hitting 60, though it should be hitting a solid 60 since the Snapdragon 865 Plus was hitting a solid 60 most of the time with these same settings. No problem over there. Dead Trigger 2, unfortunately no ultra high graphic option. No 120 Hertz FPS refresh rate option over here. So once again, stuck to 60. Hopefully this changes going forward. Hopefully the developers hear me out there. Real Racing 3 have already jumped on board with the new Snapdragon chipset. 120 FPS over here on screen. Once again, not real time. Now let's move on to some benchmarks. So we're going to test out. I'm going to do things a little bit differently. Very similar to my recent benchmark test. We're going to test out the battery at the start as well as the temp at the start using a heat gun. Then we're going to run through 3 benchmarks, that being AnTuTu version 8, Geekbench version 5, and 3D Mark Wildlife. And at the end of all 3 of those tests, we're going to check the battery drain as well as the temp gain, and then we'll get to the scores of all 3, and that's right now. So the battery drain of the X60 Pro Plus got a rate of 22.4 milliamp hours per minute, and in terms of temperature, it added 16.5 degrees in Celsius. AnTuTu benchmark score results here, 732,388 points, making it the highest ranked ever seen on my channel here. Geekbench here, iPhone on top, taking the crown there, though I don't think the vivo X60 Pro Plus is that far behind, considering it is a much cheaper phone. When it comes to 3D Mark Wildlife, the iPhone right at the top there with a score of over 8,049 frames per second. The Vivo pretty much slap bang in the middle with 5,741 points and 34.4 FPS. The vivo X60 Pro Plus might not have the biggest battery, wireless charging, WQHD resolution, dual speakers, or an IP certification. And honestly, at this price point, it should have at least 2 of those 5 things. But it does have an elegant leather design, flagship-worthy camera setup, super bright curved AMOLED display that boasts a 120 Hz refresh rate, Snapdragon 888 chipset, paired with 12 gigs of LPDDR5 RAM and UFS 3.1 storage that crushes any game you throw at it, and adds some memorable features to its new Android 11 skinned OriginOS software. But it's not alone in the race for being one of the best Android smartphones around. Its recently released sibling, the vivo IQ7, and probably its biggest rival, the Xiaomi Mi 11, both cost a lot less money. The IQ7 may sport 120 watt flash charging, and the Mi 11 might have a WQHD display and wireless charging as well, but neither of them come close to the camera capabilities of the X60 Pro Plus. On the other hand, we have the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra and Huawei Mate 40 Pro. They both have flagship features that the Vivo lacks, but they both cost a hell of a lot more money, not to mention the Huawei is missing Google services. That leaves us with the Vivo X60 Pro Plus, a brilliantly crafted piece of kit that I could definitely recommend for some, but in this case, I'd rather cough up the extra cash for a phone with all the bells and whistles. After all, it will still put a pretty big dent in your wallet.